This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, and I show 16 people in attendance. Stacy, will you read the declaration of state of emergency, please?
Sure. Due to the nature of the declaration of a state of emergency due to novel coronavirus COVID-19, pursuant to Code Section 2.2-3708.2, this meeting is to be held by electronic communications via the web platform GoToMeeting. The catastrophic nature of this declared emergency makes it impracticable and unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location, and the purpose of this meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the public body.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Stacy, will you conduct a roll call, please?
Yes, from the city of Fredericksburg, Dave McLaughlin.
Here.
Joshua Brock.
Present.
John Castellarin.
Here.
Matthew Rowe.
Here.
From Spotsylvania County, Al Durante. Neil Holleran. From Caroline County, Ken Pogue. Michael Hoyt. Justin Chenault. From Stafford County, Melvin Allen. David Schwan.
Present.
Ethelene Crenshaw. Glenn Goldsmith. And Glenn had mentioned he was getting on late. Wade Sudreth.
Here.
Tara Durant.
Present.
From King George County, Robert Gates.
Here.
At-large members, Larry Gross.
We're here.
Rupert Farley.
Here.
And Dustin Savage.
Here. Here.
And do we have anyone from Spotsylvania? Do we have Al or Neil joined us yet? No? Okay, oh, I see Al just joined us. So we do have someone from Spotsy now. I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. It's need a motion to approve the agenda that's presented to you online, unless anyone has any changes they need to make the agenda. I'll ask
This is
for the
Rupert.
change.
So moved.
Okay, so moved by Rupert.
Dave Swan, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you. Moving to the meeting minutes, I had two things I wanted to bring up. They were just to clarify. If we go down to item 8C, 8 Charlie, the last little sentence on there. There it says, Mr. Gross asked about how streetlight can differentiate modes. Mr. Lehane responded there are certain. I think we ought to say what modes are. The discussion was, I think, how we could tell if it was a bus with a bunch of people on it, or people in individual cars, or that sort of thing. And I think it'd be helpful for the minutes that we just said different modes of transportation or something along that lines. Does that make sense,
Okay,
Larry? What you were asking about back then?
Yeah, that was what I was asking.
Yeah, okay. I think that'd just be helpful. So, and then the second thing is down number 12, and Rupert, if you'll pay attention here, because you asked member reports, you indicated he was unhappy with the format of the agenda and would prefer links for each agenda item. And I think there was a response to that from Stacy, as I remember, that said, this was a one-off. Normally we have it, and we will continue to have those links. And is that your understanding, Rupert? Okay, no, Stacy, you remember that we it was basically resolved. He said he didn't like the format, but it was only because the links were on for the last meeting only. I think it was a one-off.
Yes, that's correct. We actually have changed it back to the way it was, so that matter should be resolved.
Okay, so maybe just a sentence says the matter's been resolved. We return the old, something like that.
Okay.
We don't want to have an unhappy customer out there. Okay. So given those two changes, are there any other discussion on the minutes that need changing or adjustments?
Move approval of the minutes.
Thank you,
As
Rupert.
changed.
Can I hear a second?
Yeah, this is Rupert.
Second, Al.
Okay, I'm sorry, was that a second?
Yes,
Okay,
it was Al.
thank you. All right, all in favor of the minutes as amended?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Anybody opposed?
Stacy, Dave, this is Neil Holleran with Spotsy County. I just got on 2 minutes ago. Thanks. Sorry.
Oh, great. Thanks, Neil. Yep, you and Al are on. That's good. Okay, is there anybody who's opposed to the minutes? All right.
Dave, this is Rob Gates. I abstain.
Okay, yep, thank you. Yep. If you weren't at the meeting, you should abstain.
And Dave Swan abstains.
Thank you.
Dustin Savage abstains.
Excellent. Okay, old business. I don't have any old business. Is there any old business from the floor? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to item 6, which will be a review of the policy committee meeting.
Okay, so I have 4 items to bring your attention to from the last policy committee meeting. The first is the committee approved the roadway scoring methodology, which is going to be used when staff create the new long-range transportation plan. This is the transportation plan for the Fredericksburg region that plans for transportation projects with a 20-year horizon. Next, the committee approved a transfer of transportation alternatives funding. Transportation alternatives is a term used to refer to walking and pedestrian modes, anything that's not, cars, trains, buses, things like that. So they approved a transfer of transportation alternative funding for the Flatford Road sidewalk project in northern Stafford County. The third item, the committee declined to take action on Spotsylvania County's request to send a letter to Congresswoman Spanberger expressing FAMPO's support of a list of Spotsylvania's transportation projects, which they would like to have considered for potential federal funding. And the fourth item to highlight is the policy committee will actually be meeting on a Thursday. That's going to be Thursday, May 20th at 6 p.m. rather than the regularly scheduled meeting. This will allow them to approve several documents that's out for public comment without having to schedule a second meeting in May.
That roadway scoring strategy was one that was presented to us that we got to see at our previous meeting.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, any questions about the policy committee? Okay, time for public comments. Stacy has reported that there are no written comments that she has to read. So it is time for anyone in the public who is called. So there's a few phone calls out there who might want to make a statement at this time to the committee. Is there anyone from the public listening in who would like to make a statement at this time to the committee?
This is Ethelene Crenshaw. You can mark me present.
Thank you, Ethelene. Okay, no comments from the public. We will close it. There will be a second opportunity at the end of the meeting for public to make comments as a result of the meeting. Okay, public comment period. The first one is closed. Okay, now we're going to talk about, Stacy's going to lead us about new community engagement and the equity plan. And there's three presentations there.
Yeah, if we could open up the number one, there we go. So we have been working on a new community engagement and equity plan, and it is currently out for public review and comment. At our last meeting, I mentioned this, and so at today's meeting, I want to give you more comprehensive information about it so that you have time to review it and to provide any kind of feedback to us before it goes before the policy committee in June for approval. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've had some questions. So the plan is called the Community Engagement and Equity Plan. And I want to clarify what equity means. It's often confused with equality. So equality refers to something being equal, whereas equity refers to something being fair. And the little graphics that you can see on your screen show you the difference. On the one that's equality, all of those people are getting the same kind of step stool to look over the fence, but there's still participants who have issues looking over that fence. But on the other side, the right side with equity, the participants are getting the exact number of step stools that they need to see over the fence. So that's the difference when we talk about equity. Next slide, please. The purpose of this plan. So this plan helps us satisfy federal requirements to have what's called a Title VI plan. And Title VI deals with entities that receive federal funding not discriminating against people. It also fulfills the requirement for MPOs to have a public participation plan. And having this plan helps us strengthen the transportation decision-making process because, as you are aware of, when decision makers hear from the public and the public's able to provide feedback in a meaningful way, decision makers can make better decisions. Also, it's basically a plan for staff to follow. That's the primary purpose of it. And so it's going to help us follow a plan to ensure that all members of the community are afforded an opportunity to meaningfully participate. And it's also a guide that committee members can follow so that they know what FAMPO should be doing. Finally, it does provide a small section that gives some resources for the public. So if they're interested in reviewing the plan and learning more about Title VI and how FAMPO conducts public participation, they can learn it in this plan as well. Next slide. Just a quick overview of the different sections of the plan. It starts off with an overview of the federal non-discrimination laws that FAMPO must follow. And then we convey the actions that FAMPO takes to comply with those federal requirements. Then there's another section that conveys the goals and strategies that staff use to bring the public into the decision-making process. And there's also a method for staff to develop and document and then analyze how our community outreach efforts are going. And as I said, there's also a section for the public which explains why public participation is important and the different ways that they can influence transportation decisions. Next slide. We've also developed a community engagement and equity vision statement. For the sake of time, I won't read that, but you can find that in the plan. We've not had a vision statement before. We have also developed 3 different community engagement goals. We've developed those after we had those focus group sessions, if you recall learning about that in the last CTAC meeting. So those folks really helped us develop some engagement goals. Next section. And again, these are just highlighting some of the points of the focus group feedback that we received. They really helped us refine our outreach strategies, particularly with regards of reaching traditionally underserved and folks that are hard to reach in the community. Next slide. So how is this plan different from other plans? If you've been around FAMPO for a while, you probably are familiar with our previous Title VI and what we refer to as our public participation plan. So I'll just point out a few ways how this is different. The biggest difference is this is one master plan for those 2 separate plans. The other difference is we've updated and detailed our outreach strategies. You can read about those in the plan. We've also created a process that will help us document and plan our outreach efforts. So we'll start with what's our plan, how are we going to do this, making sure everyone's included in the decision-making process. We've also added a process for evaluating the effectiveness of our outreach strategies. So a way to reflect back and think what worked, who didn't we reach, who did we reach, things like that. We also updated information for the public, that small section. We try to simplify it and give them some really simple ways of how they can participate and explain the legal authorities to them so that they can, so we have transparency and they know what we should be doing and how we're meeting those goals. And I guess we can move on. Next slide. So the timeline, as I said, this is out for public comment. It's going to be out through June 4th, and you will have plenty of time to review this because we're not going to ask for your feedback on the plan until your June meeting. That's going to be on June 16th. There will be a public hearing on May 20th. That's an upcoming Thursday of this month. That's going to be at the policy committee meeting. So if by that time you've had time to review this and you want to directly address policy committees with your concerns or express your support, you can attend that meeting and do so. Otherwise, we'll follow back up with you at your June meeting, get your comments, and then we're going to ask for your endorsement of the plan. And that's just basically something that we pass on to the policy committee who will actually approve the plan. So through your endorsement, you can convey support or you can convey your concerns. And the policy committee won't formally vote to adopt it until June 21st. So you have quite a while to review this. Next slide. Things we're doing during the public comment period. So we've got flyers out at the public libraries that are explaining what this document is and how the public can provide feedback. We are doing live streamed Q&A on Facebook and YouTube about it. We've had social media ads and posts. There's been an article in Fredericksburg.today, which is an online news source. We've sent out mass emails, so hopefully you all saw that in your inbox. If not, it might have went to your spam. And we have a great webpage with video resources walking you through the document. And we're still looking for opportunities to do some in-person outreach. Things are still slowly coming back online, so we have not been able to do in-person yet. And as I said, there'll be a public hearing May 20th where the community can share any kind of concerns or express support to the policy committee. Next slide. One important thing to note when you review the plan, you will notice that in the appendix where we should have our maps and data, there isn't any. There's basically a statement which you see on your screen that we have intentionally left it off. We will not implement the plan until we have that section filled out, but we need to wait for the 2020 census data in order to create timely maps and data sets. Next slide. Just some things that you can comment on. So you should have this in your packet to refer back, but you can help add to our stakeholder and community partner list, which is in our appendix. You might have some community groups that you think we should reach out to in the future. We'd love to have those documented in the plan. You also could review the guide for the public. It's a very small section. Provide feedback on, is it helpful as a member of the public? Is it easy to understand? Are we missing something? You can also comment on what you think of our outreach strategies. So we've really tried to detail those. Those are contained on a chart on a few pages, and you got the page numbers there, and you can let us know if anything needs to be added, or give us a thumbs up if certain strategies are better than others. And then also, if you want to review the section called Overview of Civil Rights and Equity Requirements, you can provide your comments on the actions that we take to promote that equitable participation and to comply with the federal non-discrimination laws. And I know as I say that, that sounds complicated, but if you just review that section, the Overview of Civil Rights and Equity Requirements, it's really not that complicated, and we'd appreciate your thoughts on that too. Next section. I think that's the last slide. Yep, so there's a website. We have the link there. It's also included in your agenda packet, and you can find it in our homepage menu as well. I tried to go through that quickly so we don't have a super long meeting, but are there any questions? No, okay. Can we close out of the PowerPoint then and just click briefly on those two resources? So under the agenda, there were two resources. This one is a brochure. This is what we have up at the public libraries. If you're interested in sharing it with anyone, you can share it directly from the web link, or if you have a place in the community where you'd like to drop some off, let me know, and I'm happy to print some out and get those to you. And we can move on to the other link. Okay, the other link is to the actual plan. So you've got that in your packet as well. And I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So that's some homework for us to take on. The next presentation is the Rural Transportation Work Plan. Carrie Barber's going to present that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everybody. So the Rural Work Program is a yearly document that lays out the work that will be done with rural funding for each fiscal year. To develop this year's Rural Work Program, we met with planners, staff, and elected officials from Caroline and King George County to find out what their transportation priorities would be for FY22. Among the projects we'll be working on with them are assisting them with data analysis for economic development grant applications for King George, helping to identify potential residential access improvements for Caroline County, and assisting with smart scale applications and other funding applications for both counties. There's also language in the document to cover other planning opportunities that may come up if either county wishes it. Along with these specific projects, we will also be providing general planning analysis support and assisting with long-range transportation planning and helping with VDOT coordination. I'm happy to take any questions.
Oh, Carrie, I'm sorry, I was muted.
Oh,
Carrie,
okay.
in the plan there, the acronym SDP was used as we were working to identify requirements, I think, with SDP. What is that acronym?
So which page is that on, please?
Geez,
And I'm not sure what letters you're saying.
oh, Sierra Delta Papa, SDP.
S.
Yeah, shoot up.
Hey, Dave, hold on a minute. I'll find it for you. Just a minute.
Thank you.
SDP.
Sierra Delta Papa.
I don't believe there's an SDP in the documents.
Okay.
I'm
Mr. Chair,
wondering if you're referring to SPR.
If it's SPR, it's State Planning and Research. It's a funding bucket.
Okay. State Planning and Research, SPR. Okay. I wrote down the note improperly. State Planning and Research. Okay, that makes sense. It was obvious state funding, but I couldn't figure out what it was. SPR. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any questions from anyone else?
Just a question from me. Carrie, do you need any particular inputs from anyone in this group regarding that process? I don't have something in mind. I'm just wondering if you had any requests.
So this document has already been approved by the GWRC board. So I don't need any comments from anyone. This is basically just for your information so that everybody is familiar with the process.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, Matt is going to update us on the King George Transportation Planning, which is relevant to the previous discussion.
Yes, it is. All right, thank you. So I'm just going to give a brief update to the King George Transit Feasibility Study. So as some of you may know, this study was in the current fiscal year's rural work plan, and as Carrie just presented, next fiscal year's rural work plan, this study is also in there for continuation and completion of the study. So I'm just going to give a brief update of that and where the study is at. So the purpose of the study was to provide an overview of the previous King George Transit study. So there was a previous study completed in 2017/2018 that discussed the possibility of bringing Fred Transit service to the county. So we're really looking to provide an overview of that and then update items from that study and other items that we see could be of use. And then to look into the cancellation of service back in 2012. So some of you may or may not know, King George County used to actually have two Fred routes in the county, K1 and K2. K2 ceased service in 2011 and K2 ceased service in 2012. So King George has been without Fred Transit since 2012. And then we'll be looking into really just a general feasibility of service into the future years. So as I mentioned, the previous transit study basically analyzed major transit generators and the need for service among residents and Dahlgren commuters, and provided service scenarios related to peak period and all-day transit service between Dahlgren and Fredericksburg, a loop through King George County, and potential for weekend service. So as well as that, we're looking into the feasibility of future service. So transit needs, so looking at where transit-dependent individuals may be within the county, so seniors, persons with disabilities, low-income households, and zero-vehicle households. Also completing a commuter analysis to understand employment clusters in the county and travel patterns to and from Dahlgren, as well as talking with the county and looking at many of the FAMPO documents to figure out where and how much future growth may be occurring in the county. So one of the items we looked into was the commuter analysis. So Naval Support Facility Dahlgren is one of the largest employers in the county. And from the 2018 study, about 60% of those who are commuting to Dahlgren commute between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. and between 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. So the map on the left is showing the travel flows to and from Dahlgren within the county. So the darker colors, the red and the orange, signify where higher amounts of people are coming from compared to the darker greens and lighter greens. And then the map on the right is showing the Dahlgren workforce profile within the GWRC region. So every year they output a profile of their workforce, signifying where everyone works, not just in the GWRC region. What I have done here is clip that to the GWRC region for reference. So we can see almost 2,000 people work in King George County, half that in Spotsylvania, a little more than half that in Stafford and Fredericksburg, and then a little over 150 people in Caroline County. And then one of the other things we're looking at is employing the use of streetlight data, which is kind of a big data company that allows us to analyze travel activity and patterns to look at kind of the number of trips within the county and where they're occurring. So each of the hexagons here are representing a volume of trips for the 2019 year for all modes, so vehicles, pedestrians, and bicycles, between 5 a.m. and 11 p.m. So the darker blues are referencing where there's higher volumes of trips. So these darker blue areas could be good places for a transit service to go through, especially to have a bus stop. So this map can be used to illustrate where a transit service could potentially be feasible and where bus stops could be located. And then also looking at those same travel patterns, but specifically this chart is discussing vehicle travel patterns on weekdays and weekends. So in the blue, the top chart referencing the weekday travel patterns and kind of the peak periods of travel. So you get that morning commute a little bit before 8 a.m. as a peak travel period. Then it sort of dies down through the midday and comes back up to really the overall peak for the county between 4:30 and 5:30 p.m. in the afternoon. And then similarly on the weekend, has a little bit of a different flow here, kind of a gradual increase, level off, and then a gradual decrease. So the peak hour is little after lunchtime. So this can help illustrate if we're looking at different times for service, what times might be useful to have service and what times make sense. And then also looking at kind of places specifically for bus stops, where bus stops could be located. So particularly of interest is in the Dahlgren area along US 301. So just off to the top right of the map here is the Harry Nice Bridge and Maryland, and then off to the left is further into King George County and eventually down to 301, Route 3, Fredericksburg. So looking at Dahlgren, there's several areas that could potentially have bus stops. One of those being the shopping center out here at the intersection of 301 and 206. Several stores are located here, including a grocery store. Another location being within the town of Dahlgren, all the way up to the entrance to the naval base. The Walmart and shopping center along US 301. The UMW Dahlgren campus, University of Mary Washington Dahlgren campus, as well as several defense contractors and hotels within Dahlgren. So really those are just some of the key points there. And then future population employment growth was also looked at. These are from FAMPO's 2045 LRTP, and really just looking at where the growth may be occurring and will occur in the future. So the maps on the left here are showing the population density and then the employment density by transportation analysis zone. And then the maps on the right here are showing those same figures. The maps on the left were 2017, and the maps on the right are looking at 2050 densities. So we can see there's going to be a lot of growth that could be occurring along the US 301 corridor and along the Route 3 corridor. So those are definitely good places that a bus service could be feasible and could be of use. So really next steps are to work with King George, work with the county, and to work with Fred Transit to finalize the study scenarios. So specifically where routes are going and where they're going to and coming from, and then finalizing the draft document and getting that out for review, and then presenting to the King George County Board and the GWRC Board before finalizing and approving the study. And I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Rob from King George. I was just curious, when you showed bus stops up to the main gate on the base, has there been any conversation with the base about how to move people from that point to the far reaches of the base?
There has been no conversation related to that with the base. This is more just an illustrative study to illustrate the feasibility of it. If the county wanted to take steps to discuss that, as well as Fred, if they're looking to implement the service, that is certainly a possibility.
Yeah, there used to be a taxi service on the base decades ago, but it hasn't been there in probably at least 15 or 20 years.
If no one else has any other questions, that'll be it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Matt, I had one.
Yep.
We did this in 2018. I remember that. Is there any? I mean, I remember it was well received. It was reported to be well received. Is there any success stories specifically that came out of it that you recall?
So I was not present at FAMPO when that
Right.
study was completed, so I can't speak to any specific success stories or any items that came out of it that have been implemented. I don't think there has been anything implemented, but not certain on that.
Mr. Chair, the one good sign, I believe, and I'm not sure if Fred is on the call, they may want to comment, but my understanding, at least from the conversations I've had with them, is that the bus ridership was actually on the increase when the final route to Dahlgren, out to King George, was shut down. It wasn't actually dropping. They did combine the two routes into one instead of two. But that one route had a steady ridership. It wasn't sort of reducing and collapsing. So that is a good sign.
I can't remember if the 301 corridor study came directly out of this or was just coincidental, but that certainly had a lot of very good information in it. Okay.
I think that was a VDOT study, Dave, as I recall. The corridor study.
Yeah, I think you're right. I didn't know if having this study helped influence or get us to get that study done, or it was just it just was an obvious thing to do. I don't remember. Anyway.
Yeah, as I recall, it was one of the two vendors that did the corridor study, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think you're right.
We have the brief from the vendor or whoever gave it in our files, I'm sure.
Yep.
Yeah, that is correct. The corridor study can be found on VDOT's website if anybody's interested in taking a look at it. It was a Route 301, 206 arterial preservation study, and that focused just on roadway improvements along 301 and 206 in King George and Caroline County.
Okay.
That was a great study, and just a comment. 301 was looking at it as an alternative to 95, north-south, which was a great idea. Improvements to streamline the flow, the congestion, any possible congestion along 301, which does get congestion up in Maryland primarily. Hello, anybody still there?
Okay, not hearing any other discussion.
I have a question, Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, go ahead, please.
So the study, I mean, just from this one particular document here, and it's, talking about loop service, and like the data points are nice, seeing the, the hex node activity where you can track a path. Is this transit study, assuming for bus service, is it solely relying on the base activity as justification to bring this back into service?
I would not say it is solely relying on that justification. I would note that within King George County, of locations and areas that have the highest amount of people activity, Dahlgren is the place with the highest amount of people activity. So I wouldn't say it's solely relying on necessarily the naval base, but more so just Dahlgren and the area around it is definitely of importance. But there's also other areas in King George and people in King George who don't work at the naval base who are in need of transit service. So that is one of the reasons we looked at not just commuters, for instance, but also looked at transit-dependent riders and other locations in King George. For instance, one of the routes could potentially go to Mary Washington Hospital, and that, of course, would be serving the residents of King George County and providing them with a public transit access to a major hospital. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Matt. I actually just thought of a question, and you may have already mentioned it, and I may have missed it. But if this bus service goes through, would this be time limited, or would it be 24-hour service, or?
So with Fred's service, I believe all Fred's service except for one or two of the services that serve the University of Mary Washington go from between 7 and 8 a.m. till about 7 to 8:30 or 9 p.m. So that would be a general time frame for when the service would run. It runs similar to the current Fred schedule for other routes.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but there are shifts outside of those.
Yes.
So, when we're looking at total numbers, if we're not providing service for all of those shifts, then those numbers aren't accurate. Now, I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm saying that, once again, we're looking at an example where, public bus service needs to provide what people need. We've seen this, we've talked about this in a number of instances with Fred and the limitations. So.
Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned, no disagreement there, but there are definitely limitations for the current services at and kind of what we are currently operating under. So we're going to follow kind of where that currently is at, and in the future, if there were to expand service, there would always be the opportunity to expand service for King George as well.
Mr. Chair, just to comment on that as well, Fred, I'm sure some of you are aware, but Fred is proposing to expand their, let's say, their time of service from an hour or an hour and a half earlier in the morning for their current routes. So they are trying to expand that service, the time duration during the day, so that they can serve more people, particularly people going to work. So some of their routes have started only at 8 a.m. They're now moving them to 7 a.m., in one or two cases to 6:30 a.m. to help people get to work. So that's going to add additional riders who couldn't use the service before, provided, of course, that the jurisdictions that provide a portion of the funding vote to support it. So it's always, I think, difficult for transit providers because they've both got to find the funding and, secondly, provide a great service. And those two things, as you correctly point out, don't always tie up. And then you've got to try and influence people to support greater service. Fred does obviously get federal funding, but a portion of their funding has to come from local sources as well.
And Fred Transit's website can provide you all with more information on some of the things they're looking to expand in the future, as well as Ian's administrative presentation from a few policy committee meetings ago has some information on that as well.
Okay, any other comments or questions? All right, Ian has an update for us on Lafayette Court study, multimodal study phase 2.
Thanks again, Mr. Chair. I don't have any slides on this because it's a very brief update. The Lafayette Boulevard phase 2 study is the roadway portion of the study. Phase 1 was the transit portion, which looked at Fred bus routes on Lafayette Boulevard. Phase 2 is the roadway upgrade portion. which is currently underway. It fell into a little bit of disarray during the first period of COVID when FAMPO had lost recently a number of the leaders of the staff, and also COVID hit and everybody was scrambling to just maintain what was existing. We've since effectively resuscitated the study. VDOT is still managing it and the consultant is working on it again. We had a presentation in the last month on progress of the roadway portion of the study, and the stakeholders at that presentation asked for some additional work to be done on modeling, adding lanes and various other things. That work is currently being done, and a follow-up stakeholder meeting is going to be held soon. And then a presentation will be prepared for the FAMPO committees, particularly the TAC, to show what the results of the study of the phase 2 portion of the study, should I say, what those results are. So we look forward to a good presentation coming soon after the next stakeholder meeting. But the study is nearing completion. So we hope in the coming 1 to 3 months that the study actually wraps up, and then the final presentation is given to FAMPO committees, and we can see what the results of the study, and then start work on, you know, funding applications and so on to implement the recommendations of the study. So it's quite far along. We're hoping for another stakeholder update soon, and then a presentation to FAMPO committees on the roadway portion of that study, and then the study will be finalized in due course. So I think that's where we are. No need to have a long presentation now, but I think a good presentation is in the works and will be coming out soon.
Good, thank you. Any questions about that study that's or the update? Anyone? All right. Move on to advisory role discussion with Stacy.
Sure. So this is a topic that we talked about at the last CTAC meeting, and just wanted to give you all an opportunity to pick up the discussion and see if there was any kind of agreement on a certain topic that CTAC might like to dive more in depth to. There's some suggestions on the slide that's pulled up. So it could be something as simple as everyone takes a ride on the Fred bus and groups back together and shares their concerns, things that they loved about it. And if there's anything worth mentioning to the policy committee, you could put that in writing and send that up to them. And this way you can fulfill your advisory role a little bit more easy and effectively with the policy committee. So any ideas can be brought out today at the meeting. And if you agree on something to look further into, that's great. If not, I guess we can just keep it going as an ongoing conversation, and perhaps at one of these meetings, you'll discover something that everyone thinks it's great to look more into.
This is Josh Brock. I just wanted to comment. Looking through these, I think these are good ideas. They're interesting ideas. They speak to the proactive nature of the CTAC, or at least you know, as part of what we do in terms of getting into the transportation system and reporting our findings on it. I mostly just wanted to make a comment from my perspective as to sort of the organizational role of the CTAC, which down at the bottom here, we've got the seek the guidance option. And in terms of asking the PSC what they need from us, I think that's great. I think the PSC should also be very aware that anytime they have any questions for us, they can come to us on any consulting kind of basis, because that is sort of our primary purpose here, is to be the easily accessible voice of the population, right? So you don't have to do a survey to ask the population everything. You can ask us at least as kind of an initial jaunt. The other comment I wanted to make is this top under research options, the explore links between land use and transportation planning. I believe Mr. Allis talked about that a few months ago. I think that's maybe the most important thing that FAMPO and the General Transportation Project should be engaged in, is making sure those efforts are in lockstep with one another. And so if we're looking into things that we can do as the CTAC, I think the more we can get into that, the better. Everything else, we can provide some insight into it, but also there are other instruments that could be used and maybe get more detailed information. But as far as the planning process is concerned, I think that the land use and transportation is sort of our most important role here. And if we could be involved in that, I think the more the better.
I was thinking along the same lines about the importance of the land use and transportation planning. Something specific I was thinking is if we could, even in our LRTP, put in a discussion about that and the linkage, and we wouldn't have answers. We wouldn't necessarily have projections of how it's going to turn out. But I think putting it in there so it's understood, that connection, and it's included in our planning efforts, or not necessarily included, but as part of the considerations for our planning efforts, I think would be good. Who else has? I know Al's talked about this before. Rupert's talked about this before. Yeah, I'm also in favor of doing the, getting the kind of the guided tour of the the bus transportation system, which was offered to us. So we should take advantage of that. We'll set something up on that one and invite who's ever available. Any other thoughts?
I think Al's, there you go, Al, you were.
I think all three of these, and there are probably more, but all three of these options are important. Again, the land use and transportation, it would be nice if there was a way to, I mean, there seems to me to be a total absence of thought between transportation and traffic and approval of development projects and things like that. So it would be nice if we could sort of have a way to go back and, a back and forth conversation with localities, even not just with the policy committee, but with actual localities. And I don't know if that's even feasible, but I mean, I think it's something that would help improve quality of life in the region, and maybe something worth discussing with the leaders of the various counties. And again, the transportation alternatives is, I mean, we really need to be looking at alternatives to the way we've been doing things for the last, for decades. So, and just driving around for us, I mean, I know, and there again, there's a lot of changes going on in the roads, but it's I don't think there's ever been an actual accident there, but the road, Spotsylvania Parkway, where it crosses Route 1, and sort of where you turn into little shopping strip there. The corner, anyway. I mean, there are people who, yeah, it's like 6. It's like 12 lanes of traffic that merge there, and there are constantly people U-turning. You know, so there are people right turning and U-turning, and eventually, I think there's, you know, that's as traffic continues to increase in that area, which it has steadily. That's going to be a real problem, and there's really no reason for people to U-turn because they can go up Spotsylvania Avenue. And, you know, if they're going into that shopping center, you know, just go up rather than make a U-turn and go into one of the other entrances. So I think, you know, and again, that's more of a county issue, but that's things like that probably need to be looked at.
Mr. Chair, it's Ian Ollis. I happen to agree with Al, and I think that perhaps what the CTAC could do is to make it a discussion item next meeting or something about how exactly, what exactly is the appropriate way for us to engage with the localities about where they're building new housing, for example, and where they're allowing new businesses to be placed. And are those locations for housing and work opportunities connected to the main transportation system? Or are they far from the main transportation routes? Because if you build them far away from the main transportation routes, then you got to start building new roads and new pipelines and all sorts of infrastructure, which is expensive. But if you can cluster them around existing main thoroughfares, main transportation routes, it cuts down on the amount of funding you need to find to upgrade the roads because they're already closely located. And there's the question about density. You know, we've seen that some counties have down-zoned areas that are rural, which is fine. I mean, that might be the right thing to do, but that also means you need to upzone areas that are close to your shops and main roads and highways and so on. I mean, those discussions are crucially important for the future. And if you plan it well, you can actually have much less congestion in the future based on how you plan where you put housing, where you put factories and stores and that kind of thing. So, I mean, I'd encourage you to carry on and have that discussion and think of ways of engaging the localities. Do we invite them to our meeting, or do we go to their meeting, or do we write letters? I mean, there are all sorts of methods. I don't presume to suggest how the CTAC should do that. It's up to the CTAC to decide how they think are the best ways to engage with that kind of input. But it's certainly a thing that should be done. I encourage the CTAC to carry on with that process and think of ways to do that engagement.
Hey, Stacy, you, well, we'll copy that, or we'll capture that from these comments from the recording of the meeting and kind of flesh out what we have here.
Hey, Mr. Chair, Dave Swan, just a short comment.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think when we're talking land use here and public or transportation, whether it's public or private, we might have to look at zoning because that has a lot to do with the land use. And what are the impacts, positive and negative, of zoning? I mean, are we more successful with transportation where we've used certain zoning codes? Because I know that Stafford, for instance, there's a lot of changing applications for zoning changes. And I don't know I don't have a feel for it because I don't have a knowledge base on how much that affects existing transportation plans, or if the zoning changes. And I don't know what the zoning planners look at. I don't know if they look at a transportation impact. That would be an interesting question. Probably could be answered very easily with the planners. Does anybody else have a comment on that or any experience with it?
I don't, Dave. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
I don't have experience with
for
it.
example, Stafford just made some changes to land use for A-coded zoning. Like I'm in an A zone, I'm agricultural. And if they change it to residential, then what came into play in Stafford was the size of the property, the size of the lot. And I don't remember the details. It was about 4 or 5 months ago. And of course, it's all virtual, so it'd be tough to get in a meeting to really ask questions and participate fully. But it definitely had some impacts. And I think they belayed the decision on what they were planning on doing. And I don't believe it was transportation related. It was just land use related. But that might be a good question for planners. And I know we work with county planners all the time. And I am only assuming that they come back and look at the existing transportation plans for the roads that are involved. Maybe not.
Well,
That's all I have on it, Dave.
Well, I remember that whole discussion was about reducing the density of housing that could be built on some of these large lots throughout the county. And then what effect it has on infrastructure if it gets out of control and keeps going the way it is. So what does it do for schooling? What does it do for the roads and all these other issues? And so there was more of an effort to, from what I understand, Stafford's initiative to try and concentrate more of the growth into the areas where they can handle the infrastructure, or they can provide the infrastructure that would go along with that additional growth. So
yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very related to what we're talking about. So
Yeah.
it would be a good one for us to maybe just present it at our next meeting, is just a discussion of here's what happened and here were the kind of the pros and cons, and the discussion where it stands with it. And so we would have a better understanding of that discussion, which makes us better representatives of of the citizenry. So I'm
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so I'd like to put that, we'll look at the agenda for the next meeting, see if we can just put that on as a summary discussion of the pros and cons, why people were for it and why people were against it. To be a short little research would give us that. So I think it'd be enlightening for us.
Yeah. But that's a good case in point. I think Stafford presented a good case there because the board was split on it. And, there's always pressure in Stafford from developers. I've gone to some of the meetings within the last year and a half where the developers have just dominated. And they've even gotten into some meetings that they really shouldn't have been in with the public, with just the public who had issues with land use. And they've basically sat at the table and remained quiet. And I know a couple of the developers, and I was surprised. Well, I was surprised they were there, for starters. But I was very leery of what, when they did speak, what they had to say. So, and there was a lot of interest on the parts of the board members that were there, trying to eavesdrop on what was going on. We had about probably a dozen tables, and the developers were randomly, at the tables. It was at one of the middle schools. Anyway, you don't want to belabor the point, but I appreciate your thoughts on putting that on the agenda for next time.
Mr. Chair, one of the interesting questions that often goes undiscussed, if that's an English word, it's probably not a good English word, but where is development appropriate? Because everybody fixates on where it's not appropriate, and that's fine. I mean, there are lots of rural areas do not need high dense housing. It wrecks the transportation system. But the other side of that coin is, where is development appropriate? And nobody ever wants to say that. Nobody ever wants to answer that question. And so you end up in these meetings with developers saying, we want it all, and residents say, we don't want any. And in reality, we all know that towns and cities slowly grow. So a much better question to ask is, where is development appropriate? And then your discussion is around finding appropriate ways to have development. And, the outcome is part of the discussion.
This is Rupert. There has been one voice to that effect over the years, and that's been mine. I've been saying for decades now, where development is appropriate is that where we have transit, where we have transit networks, and where we have transit centers, and we have people walking instead of using cars, that's where development is appropriate. In my experience with FAMPO, ever since I've attended the first meeting down at the Bowman Center, it's pretty obvious. There's no planning going on. It's only reacting. It would be nice to change that. And I made a proposal at last meeting, but I don't want to take up too much of your time repeating that's at this meeting. Thanks.
And just to follow up, I agree with Rupert on that, but the reality is that development is moving so rapidly, at least it was before COVID. It's slowed down now, but it has moved in such a rapid pace that the average citizen can't keep up with what's going on. There are quite a number of meetings. Some of the issues, Stafford uses some terms, high growth areas, and I don't remember now the exact terms they use. Up around the Garrisonville area is one of those areas. And I've lived here for 33 years now, and I've seen it change. And I've, been stuck in commuting and had a business here and couldn't get anywhere between 6 and 9 in the morning. Because of congestion. But I don't think any congestion pricing or anything like that is going to solve what's happening in our region.
It certainly would, given enough time, and that's the reason we've had all this rapid development you're talking about, is because we're subsidizing it with free roads all everywhere you want to go. If we put down, if we made every development pay its own way, including transit, we wouldn't be having this discussion now. We wouldn't be having this congestion. We would have communities that are dense and walkable and automobile independent. But we didn't go down that route. So yeah, we've had rapid sprawl, and we've got nobody to blame except ourselves for subsidizing it with all these free roads.
Yeah, and when you say that, Rupert, I also would like to add that proffers play heavily in this. And, when you have a developer who's building a development with 300 or 400 single family residences, and you require that developer to pave a lane off the main travel route that's a secondary road leading to I-95, you tell them you got to pave at least 1/8 of a mile of a turn lane on the front edge of your development.
That's nothing. That's nothing. What he's supposed to do is pay for a connection to the nearest transit hub, and stick that on the price of the houses, and see how many big McMansions. how many mansions he's going to get that way. The result of that will be, instead of McMansions, you're going to start having row houses and apartment buildings and communities that are dense and walkable. That's the whole point. And we're subsidizing the opposite.
Yeah, agreed. That process is broken, and I don't know if we're going to be able to fix it in our lifetimes. Mr. Chair, that's all I have on it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, well, we've got a couple of additions to what we're going to do. We're going to add that discussion item, and we'll organize an optional who wants to get the professional tour of the bus system, which was offered to us before. So, all right, so that's good. Thank you. Now we've got some documents out for public comment. We've got Stacy, Adam Hager, and Jordan Chandler are going to speak. Oh, typo.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here and then I'll turn it over to Adam. We have some new people on CTAC, so I just want to, before turning it over, just talk about what a public comment period is and its purpose. So FAMPO is required for certain documents to release them for either 30 days of public comment or 45 days of public comment. And the purpose of that is, one, transparency. So the public has the chance to look through our work before we get anything approved or take any action. And two, also to bring people into the planning process because they might have some ideas or catch something that we're missing. So it's always great to have a second look, even if they are not transportation planning professionals. So we welcome that kind of feedback, and that is a point of public comments. And Adam and Jordan will take it away next. We've got 3 different documents that the public can comment on. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Stacy, I'll forgive you for the typo on the agenda. I'll just quickly describe the Unified Planning Work Program, or the UPWP, for FY22. So for those of you that have been around for some time know that this is our annual work program. This is a federal requirement that we update this every year. And basically what this spells out is all of our planned activities and how we're going to pay for it next year. So I'll ask Matthew to scroll to the table of contents, which give a couple sort of high-level bullet points. Here we go. So again, it just talks about the region, talks about a little bit of FAMPO's history, things that we accomplished in this current fiscal year, which ends on June 30th. Some of the topics that we want to dive into next year, some of the broad sort of overarching activities that we do within transportation planning. Section 3 gets into some of the major studies that are ongoing in the region and studies that are proposed. Section 4 is where we get into the details as far as the program activities is what we call them, and then the different tasks that are sort of under that larger umbrella. And then lastly, Section 5 gets into the finances. So it's, gets into how the studies are funded, how our staff is funded, some of our projects that we're doing. So that's, again, a high-level overview. Some of the major updates that we've made from FY21 to 22 include really just a couple studies that are getting started here within the next couple months. So Matthew, can you go to page 20 there for studies? Yeah, thanks. And then scroll down to the East-West mobility study. So for those of you that have been around for at least a couple months now, you've heard Ian talk about the East-West mobility study. So we do have that now included in our UPWP. We have funding. The DRPT, the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, has identified in the draft 6-year improvement program to give us a grant for about $59,000 that we're going to match with some of our formula funding, so the 5303 funding that we get from the state every year to do planning work, to kick off phase 1 of that effort, which is going to focus on the transit component. And then at some point within the next fiscal year, we're not exactly sure when at this point, but we need to identify some more funding, is to do phase 2, which is a little bit broader and gets into some of the roadway activities as well. So that's one of the major highlights for this coming year as far as some of the studies that are upcoming in our region that you'll be hearing about. And I'm happy to take any questions before moving on to the 2045 LRTP.
Mr. Chair, this is Stacy. I forgot to mention one thing when we started. Can I have a second?
Absolutely.
Sure. So we have all of these documents that are out for public comment as action items on today's agenda. I'm not sure if the committee, one, has had time to review these prior to the meeting, or two, if they feel like this is something that they want to endorse or feel knowledgeable enough to endorse. So you don't have to endorse these documents. And by endorse, I mean you would just give a verbal vote saying, yes, we don't see a problem with these. And we pass that on to the policy committee before they ultimately vote to adopt these changes. So it's up to you whether you want to take action and endorse, or if you just prefer this to be for your information purposes only, that's fine as well. It's up to the chairman and committee.
When is the public comment period end for these three?
May 20th.
Okay. And that's when they go to the policy committee?
Yes, there'll be a hearing at the policy committee on all three of these that day. And then they'll vote.
Well, these have been presented to us before. They're really, they become quite technical, and I don't know what's the feeling of the committee. Do you want to endorse these, or just say, okay, they're out there for public comment and the PC is going to make these changes? I mean, the UPWP, what goes into that is very technical. I don't really feel like I'm qualified even to comment on the UPWP because the details of it is the sources of funding and the amounts of fundings and that sort of thing. The percentage of work that is divided up between the different pieces of FAMPO. Does anybody else have thoughts on that, comments, feelings?
This is Neil Holler in Spotsy County. Yes, Stacy, which documents are we talking about? Is it the special considerations one, the UPWP Dave mentioned, and another one, or what's the list consist of?
Sure. So it's all three under item F. So it's the Unified Planning Work Program that Adam just talked about. That's the staff work program for the upcoming fiscal year. And then it's amendments to our long-range transportation plan to add projects, and then an amendment to, you can think of it as the short-term transportation program, which we're adding an additional project to. And Adam and Jordan will give you some more information on them. I just wanted to jump in because Dave and I had talked about, whether CTAC actually, would feel comfortable endorsing these, and just to make it clear that you don't absolutely have to endorse them if you don't feel that it's something for the committee to do.
The second and third are a little bit different in that they're basically fact of life amendments made to the existing plans. And so endorsing them is a little easier to do than the UPWP in my opinion, as far as endorsing.
I would argue, this is Neil from Spotsy again. I would argue that you could probably endorse all three and just, take it for granted that who drafted the UPWP's got the technical expertise and they know what they're doing. That said, I think Stacy sent these out like a month ago, maybe around the last meeting or right after the last meeting, which I forgot to attend. I think and therefore I haven't had time to review them myself. I had been planning on it, so I imagine if we wanted to individually do that, we could do that by the 20th and get back to Stacy and the committee and Ian, et cetera, if we wanted to individually. And then as a committee, we could, make a motion to endorse all three after Adam and everybody goes to kind of overview the amendments or whatever these things are, or not, and go from there. Over.
Mr. Chair, Dave Swan.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we need to just take a quick look here. Just, from my experience on CTAC, the UPWP went through a extensive, I think a pretty extensive in my memory here in the last few months, revisions and discussion, I think with GWRC and probably members of the policy committee. I don't remember the specifics. But the other two are amendments, and we've already seen those plans, and they're fairly. I mean, what if we say, well, we don't approve of those plans? I don't think we are in a position to do that. If we've got a question, we can go to the tech committee and find out. But the UPWP, I don't think we should approve anything there until the public comment period has ended. I don't know if there's any others here on the CTAC that agree with me, but I believe that's the way we've done it in the past. We haven't gone ahead and approved a contingent plan like that.
Okay, well, I'm kind of thinking that we do that we have a motion not to take any action on the UPWP as far as endorsement or not endorsing it.
I have no problem moving on to the next item on the agenda.
Sorry, say again, Farley? Rupert?
Yeah, I was saying I'm fine with moving on to the next item on the agenda with no action.
Okay. Is anybody opposed to that course of action? It's not really a motion, but. Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Stacy. Do you want Adam and Jordan to finish just summarizing those documents?
Well, both of them been presented to us before. They are just amendments, kind of procedural and matter of fact amendments to the already existing plans. This isn't the new 2050 LRTP, and it's not the new TIP. They're just amendments. So I think we could endorse those two as written because of the nature of them.
Yeah, and I make a motion that we do exactly what Dave just stated as the chairman.
Okay, so the motion is to approve item number under F, it's not approve, excuse me, endorse item number 2 and item number 3, that is the 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan and the FY 21-24 Transportation Improvement Plan amendment, those two amendments, and just those two amendments. So here a second of the motion.
This is Larry, I second it.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Justin Savage abstains.
Okay. Yeah, I think the other thing is, I mean, so the motion approved. I mean, those are well done between the FAMPO staff and the TAC, getting the details of those, and so I feel very comfortable endorsing their efforts. So, okay, thank you for that. Okay, we're going to go move on to item G. So the idea is here that hopefully with the election coming up next month, it'd be great to know kind of who is the most likely front runners to be, and possibly the only person to be the Spotsylvania nominee or the Stafford nominee. Spotsylvania is in line to be the chair of the committee, and Stafford is in line to become someone from Stafford is in line to be the vice chair. And if for some reason there aren't many members of Spotsylvania on the board right now, or the committee right now, so if there was no one from Spotsylvania, we could rotate to Stafford becoming the chair, the representative from Stafford being the chair, and I guess Fredericksburg want to become the vice chair. So we just kind of rotate past Spotsylvania at this time. So Al, you got anything for us for Spotsy? Any news?
No, I don't really see any changes between now and then. As people may or may not know at this point, next meeting will be my last meeting. My wife's retiring as vice president at Germana, and we're going to be moving out of state. And while I've really enjoyed my time here on CTAC, unfortunately, I will not be able to continue.
Okay.
Well, Al, before you leave, your mission is to find a suitable candidate from Spotsylvania. All in favor? We're going to miss you,
Bye.
partner. We're going to miss you.
Thank you.
But the reality is there's only, I mean, after Al, unless the county appoints some more representatives, it's just Al and Neil. So, and
Well, Neil's here. Yeah.
I don't know if you
Neil's
have
been
any.
Neil's been on the committee. If he's not overcommitted,
There was this is Neil. There was a secret ballot via email between myself, Al, and Dave and Stacy that indicated my current status is not likely to be able to be nominated for the rotation in for Spotsy, given my current familial situation and likely inability to serve as chair. So I believe in that email I acquiesced. So for full public comment, everybody on the CTAC and can basically vouch for the many members of Stafford to rotate in and/or Fredericksburg from there, and we'll go from there. Over.
All right. Okay. So if something doesn't change between now and the next meeting, then we will expect that. Well, I guess I should ask Dave. I asked Dave Swan as a past chair if there was people interested in Stafford who would for the at the time the vice position or the chair position. So what do you got to report, Dave?
Well, I would say, Dave, I frankly haven't had time to think about this, but I'm more in favor of having, and I certainly haven't talked to these two ladies, but I think that it's time we had a woman for chair. And we happen to have the advantage in Stafford of having two on the committee. And so I would hope that they would give strong consideration. Of course, they can correspond with you privately, via email. I think is a good way to do what you've done in Spotsy with Neil, because that's something that doesn't, it can happen behind the scenes and set us up for a successful election. And then we can look at maybe Fredericksburg. I think Fredericksburg will be back around as chair as the thing goes here, unless Spotsy has an influx of candidates. But maybe somebody from Fredericksburg is the vice chair. I mean, that's just for rough guidance and planning. And I'm certainly not in a position to give guidance. So take it for what it's worth. But I don't know if
I've been a Marine and the former chair of this committee, Dave. I think you're in the perfect position to give guidance just like you just did. And I will, having acquiesced my position for Spotsy, I will go on a recruiting drive immediately after this meeting.
Outstanding. I hope I motivated you on the way out. It's bad when you're trying to plan in the future, I'm sure, to keep looking into the present. But I don't know about Wade. I think Wade is on here, or Glenn, right? Am I correct? Is Wade Sudreth on? Or, I don't remember. And Glenn Goldsmith either?
Yes. Yeah, I'm here. The Wade Sudreth speaking.
Yeah, Wade. And so, if you could coordinate with Ethelene and Tara, I think that would be a good solution. It doesn't matter to me, I'm not in a position to do either. So,
here's what I'll do.
Advice I'd offer the chair.
Okay, Dave. Here's what I'll do. I'll reach out to all members of the current members at Stafford and encourage them to participate by becoming what's going to be the chair, unless something changes in Spotsy in the next month before the election. So potentially to be the chair, and then I'll also reach out to, and all three of my compatriots from Fredericksburg are online tonight. Their attendance has been remarkable, so they make really good vice chairs, one of those three. And so we'll just come up with, and it might be 2 or 3 people from Stafford who are interested. I don't know, and that would be great. And then we'll have a regular election, or it may just be one, and it'll be kind of a, okay, it's a nominee, you're it. So. Okay, so we'll take that before the next meeting.
That's great, Dave. That's good.
This is Al. I did talk to a couple of the supervisors yesterday. I was meeting with them about another issue, And I did happen to mention that, the situation we're in. I just don't see, because of the process, I don't see that we'd be able to. I mean, I know Supervisor Frazier has somebody in mind that she'd like to nominate to the committee, but because of the county process, I'm not sure that we could get anybody in place before the next meeting.
And someone who just came aboard probably wouldn't feel real comfortable becoming a chair as well. So,
Yeah, that'd be tough, Dave. You're right. We know how tough it is. So.
Okay, well, we'll resolve it. We'll have it. We'll come up with a place, and we'll press on. It's not cool. All right. So, public comment. Do we have anyone from the public who has joined the meeting and now wants to make a statement? Is there anyone from the public who wants to make a statement? Okay, hearing none, seeing none. And if someone is from the public doesn't want to make a statement, but you want to provide some feedback to the committee, you can use the link that's shown on the screen, or was just shown on the screen there for to provide comment. Okay, moving on. There's the link. All right. Next, Stacy. Next is correspondence. Okay, so there's another public comment period for us of something to comment on. So, all right.
Yeah, so this is not a FAMPO public comment period. This is the Commonwealth Transportation Board, so the State Transportation Board. You can submit a public comment on the state's 6-year improvement program. So we have a website resource link for you there, and you can find all the information you need, review the document, and there are directions on how to submit a comment. So you're welcome to do that if that's something you're interested in, or you can just share the link with your residents in your localities.
Okay.
Now, Dave, just a comment on the staff at FAMPO. Really tremendous job on putting these resources the way you have in the agenda, especially this one here. And I mean that sincerely. I think it's great work on your part.
Yep.
Thank you.
Agree. So what I'm hearing, so now that we've had it, I see, I mean, we got three homework assignments at least. So one of them is reviewing the community outreach and equity plan. The other one is a 6-year improvement program, and comments on the action items that we wanted to put on ourselves as the Transportation Advisory Committee and the inputs to that. All right. Next is oh yeah, and this was the other thing. So this virtual panel discussion, and we can that's homework as well, because we can listen into that and participate. More being a listening, because we're trying to get input from the community. So Stacey, you want to elaborate on that, please?
Sure. Matthew, can you pull back up the agenda and click under staff reports?
Yeah, I believe I have it up right now, the webpage.
I'm seeing VDOT. So under staff reports, it should say virtual panel discussion.
Is everyone else seeing VDOT? Let me reshare my screen. All right, should be good now.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're not seeing anything, Matthew.
Yeah, I reshared my screen. It should come up in a second.
Okay.
I'm not taking back my comment on the staff. It still stands.
Is there still nothing on the screen?
There is still nothing on the screen.
Okay, hold
Mr.
on.
Ellis, they are exceptional.
It was good.
Well, why
there we go. There we go.
There we
Now
go.
we'll see it.
Dang.
So this is, well, we lost it again, Matthew, but okay, there we go. So this is just in an event invitation that's on fredericksburgpatch.com, which is a free online news source for the community. And so we are co-hosting with the Disability Resource Center a discussion panel that will feature advocates that are part of the Disability Resource Center, and they will be sharing their transportation issues in the Fredericksburg area with decision makers. We have about 19 different state, federal, and local decision makers, as well as the region's planners and transit agency officials. They're going to be joining the virtual panel. And then after the advocates speak and convey their challenges with transportation, the decision makers are going to have a chance to respond. In order to control the discussion, we are limiting who can join the meeting room. However, as what you're seeing on your screen shows, you can watch on Facebook or YouTube in real time. We'll be doing a live stream, so you can see what everyone's talking about. You can leave comments and we'll follow up after. But I think it's really going to be a light bulb moment for everyone to learn a different perspective of how we're doing with our transportation infrastructure in the region, because there's a lot of challenges that most of us don't have to ever consider, and so that falls off our radar. So it's really great to hear from other people and learn their perspective. And then while we're under staff reports, I also want to mention that Stan Huey, a longtime CTAC member, has resigned from CTAC. He is still very active with FAMPO. He's still going to be serving on the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, but he has resigned effective immediately. So we do thank Stan for his many, many, many years of service. I'm not even sure how long he's been around. It was long before me. I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I remember one of my first meetings sitting next to him, and he'd kind of lean over and, you know, give you a little background on something to kind of help a new guy get on board, so and get up to speed. So yeah, very, very helpful guy. Had great personality, obviously, as we know. So all right, thank you for that. And is that all the staff reports?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So member reports. Any members have anything to report?
I have a question. This is Ethelene.
Yes,
any idea when we're going to have on-site meetings again?
Yes, Mr. Chair, would you like me to answer that?
I'd like anybody who can answer it to answer.
Okay, so so far the governor has signaled that he possibly could allow the state of emergency to expire at the end of June. And the reason we're currently able to conduct the CTAC meeting in an all virtual environment is because there's a legal provision that says during a state of emergency, we can conduct business online. So that's why we've been doing that. Now, when the state of emergency expires, we are going to have to go back to having an in-person quorum. So we need a quorum of members present in a single location in person, but other people who have health concerns are still allowed to participate online. You just have to notify the chair. There's provisions in our bylaws if you have to see exactly the procedure there. So I would anticipate maybe in July we might be going back to in person, but we are definitely keeping an eye on it, and hopefully by the beginning, maybe I'd say, or mid-June, we should know for sure if we're going to be going back in person or not. So I know that's not a definite answer, but that's as much as we know right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments from members, committee members?
Hey, Dave Swan, just a quick comment. In view of everything that's going on in Washington with the current administration and Congress, it appears that we're going to have some type of infrastructure program coming, and it'll be over, I'm told, a 10-year period. Nevertheless, that should free up some resources for transportation and for bridges and rails and all the things that we have in our region. So we need to make sure that the Commonwealth's representative, the CTB rep, keeps us appraised of what's going on with that, because I got a feeling they're going to get heads up on what Virginia may be seeing, may be looking for, and how that's going to be distributed. I hope they're planning how to distribute that. And that's all I'll say.
This is Rupert. I don't have anything to report, but I will take this opportunity to remind all the newcomers to the area that the name of that town in King George is Dahlgren, named after Civil War Admiral John A. Dahlgren.
Yes.
Thanks.
Very good.
Not Dahlgren, right? Okay. Any others? All right. Doesn't sound like there are. So brings us to the end of the meeting. Just need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed can meet with themselves or something. All right.
Good job, Dick.
Meeting adjourned.
Have a good night.
Thank you all.